Hello, everyone. Welcome,
Hello, hello.
welcome to another episode of What the Effie. This is a special episode. Every single one is a special episode, but this is an insight to my own journey with Raz. You may know that Sunrise Capital Partners, as is shown both behind Raz and behind myself, are is our company, and we have now been in open for business, so to speak, 2 months, just a few days over 2 months. So this episode is dedicated to lessons learned along the way. So thanks, Raz, for being willing to do this with me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah. Happy to be here and to share some of the things that we've learned so far. And I'm sure that we'll have quite a bit more to learn as we go.
Absolutely, will we? We're in many ways still lining up our ducks because these little ducks are a little bit unruly. They just kind of go wherever they want. And we're trying to get things organized and systemized and really being knowledgeable. And it's not as easy as one might think because we're doing transactional funding, and there are three parts of transactional funding. And Raz, why don't you quickly outline what that is and tell the audience which parts we're doing before we get into what did we learn?
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. So, just as a reminder, transactional funding, also known as escrow protected funding, is usually referred to as three different types of transactions: funding earnest money deposits or EMDs, funding double closes, and funding Morby methods or stack methods or seller carryback methods or bridge equity methods.
Hold it.
Various different names.
You've confused half the audience already. I know that most would have understood the earnest money deposits, the EMD, and the double closes, but then you went blah, 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 blah. You gave like 4 or 5 different names. What the heck?
Yeah.
Are they all the same?
They are all the same. They just come by in very different names depending on the people who are doing them, the strategy that is being employed, or just the process of how it's being done. But essentially, let's call them seller carrybacks because this is how we call them. We like to refer to them as seller carrybacks because we think that's the most representative way of describing them. These are transactions where the seller is willing to carry back some of their equity and the buyer is incentivized to do that because in doing so they bring a lower entry fee to the table. And we can get into an example if we want to in a second. We also have another video where we walk through the transaction and we walk through the steps of a seller carryback that we can link somewhere up, down to the bottom of this video. So Sunrise Capital Partners, what we do, we focus on double closes. I think double closes are clear to everybody. 2 contracts, AB, BC. The funds for AB need to be brought in before the BC can close. That's where we come in. And for seller carrybacks, to facilitate the transaction, we essentially bring, kind of similar to the double closes, we bring the down payment, the funds for the down payment, and we get paid back from the seller carrying back the note with their equity.
Okay.
Did that help?
Yes, it helped. And again, take a look for that video around us, guys, so that you can review that, especially if you're new, as to how seller carrybacks work. But yes, I think you said it quite well. So we have started our journey by talking to as many other transactional funders our world. And by the way, if you're watching this and you're a transactional funder, please do feel free to reach out to me. And I'd love to connect with you and get to know you and see how you are doing it. Because just as they are called, they go by a couple of different names: the seller carryback, the stack method, the bridge gap, and the Morby method, along with maybe others. Each one of those can vary. And even if they're called the same thing, I say, oh, I'm doing seller carrybacks. That's my business. And somebody else says, oh, that's what my business is too. And we compare. We may find out they're not being done exactly the same because, after all, it's our money. So we can lend it as we see fit. So the rules change a little bit. So
I would also like to add to that yes, we do want to talk to folks who are doing transactional funding as well. There are peers, and we would definitely like to know you better and see how you're doing your transactions. At the same time, we would also like to connect with folks who are buying properties, who are growing their portfolios using some of these strategies, specifically the seller carryback strategy, because that is an excellent strategy of growing your portfolio fast. And because there are so many different nuances to doing these transactions, we would absolutely like to talk to you and learn how you're doing it and share what we learned as well along the way.
thank you, Raz. Absolutely correct. As well as double closes, guys. If you're doing a wholesaler doing double closes, do reach out to us. It's funny, isn't it? I'm looking to educate the folks, as opposed to, hey, come do business. And this is in part both, right? But the biggest thing is to share with you the lessons that we have learned along the way so far. So I am going to ask Raz, in no particular order, what has been the biggest surprise to you so far as to what you and I have learned? What's been the biggest surprise to you so far?
The biggest surprise has been around what we just said recently, that we found so many different ways of doing these transactions, and everybody kind of claims their way is better or their way is more legal or more correct. And it's interesting to go through this journey and ask the right questions of, why do you think this is the right way to do it? And um I feel like it's part of it is, this is a complex strategy, right? It's not something that many people do venture into. And also, it's the bigger the problem, the bigger the payoff, of course. But one of the things that has been interesting is there are multiple steps involved in this transaction. Many people seem to do it in various different ways. Some argue that their way is more correct. Some argue that some ways in which it's being done is fraudulent, which is a big claim. So we've been on an exploratory path trying to learn what have been the ways in which this is done and how we want to do it.
Yes, there are a few things I'd like to pick up on from what Raz just said. Besides the obvious that this is creative as the person who is lending the money, and therefore up to them how they do it, and that it's nuanced. It is also, like Raz alluded to, on on the spectrum of borrowing. We have go to the bank, get your credit check, get your W-2 paycheck, and see what you qualify for and say thank you to the bank, and they're going to rip you off. Yes, that's legal. All the way to, I don't know, I guess we could say being a loan shark or something like that. That's totally illegal. You're charging 7,000% and you're threatening the
Yeah,
person.
usury laws and all that.
Yes, yes. Lending, right? It's really a big field, and most people only know what banks. Of course, as you go along this, there's many legal ways, but then you get to a point where, hey, that's friggin' illegal. That's fraud. And it's coercion and it's blah, blah, blah. So what's interesting is that transactional funding, specifically the seller carryback, not the double close so much, because the double close is so boring. It's so cut and dry. But somewhere it's near that gray line. And that is true. And it's one of the reasons that I'm grateful that we're not in a position where we have to hurry up and make money for this month. So we can take our time and set our company up properly, our business up properly, so we can be proud and we can be servicing everything correctly, and that it's you know well within the
Yeah, and I think
playing
that
field.
that leads to one other point that I wanted to bring up for lessons learned here is that this strategy can be abused
It's
to the
yeah.
disadvantage of either the buyer or the seller or both. And Effie and I have.
How can it be abused? I'd like for the audience that's looking at
Mhm.
us and that knows us and is like, what are they talking about? Huh? What, huh? Where does it cross the line? Like, where can fraud and abuse take place? Besides everywhere, because, everywhere fraud can
Yeah,
happen.
well, I'm not going to touch so much about the fraud part because I feel like that goes more into the procedural steps of how is the deal fully structured, which is an important component as well. But I am more referring to the terms of the deal, right? The creative terms in which this deal is structured, and how if the buyer is either overambitious or too new, or if they straight up want to con the seller, right, or put them in a bad position, then they can do that. And
How?
they can do that by structuring the deal in such a way where the property becomes over leveraged. And that can be done in several different ways. So let's just take an example, because I think
Yeah,
that would.
let's take an extreme example so that
Yeah.
people aren't going to think, well, huh? Isn't that legal? Let's take an extreme one.
Yeah, so if we take an extreme
And this is all
example.
fiction, guys. This is fiction, but to
Fiction, yeah.
illustrate. Yeah, for
So if we
illustrate.
take an extreme example of a property that is worth, let's say, 500,000, just for easy math, and assume that the seller owns this free and clear, but let's say the property is in Florida, and Florida is flooded with inventory right now. No pun intended. Hopefully, no hurricanes hit Florida. But um, they're struggling to sell it at 500,000, right? And they really want to sell it at 500,000 because they need the funds. Now, if they structure a deal with a buyer who wants to buy on seller carryback, then the buyer has their full equity to structure the deal, right? So the buyer can go to a DSCR lender and get a loan on this property for, let's say, 80%. Now, the way that the seller carryback would work is that the difference, the 20%, is something that would be funded through us at closing, but then the seller would actually bring that 20% as a second lien in addition to the DSCR lender. Now, there is no stopping the buyer if they wanted to structure it in such a way where they don't have to limit themselves at only 20% of seller carryback. They can say they're going to take 50% seller carryback. So all of a sudden, that means that they're adding 80% from the DSCR lender and an additional 50%. And if you do the math, that's 130%. So they're over leveraging that property that anyway could not sell for 500,000. The buyer gets in trouble if the property is not cash flowing as they expected, because I don't know, maybe they wanted to use it as a short-term rental and they only underwrote it using AirDNA numbers. Fiction, right? Talk about fiction. Then 2-3 months down the line, they might find themselves forced to sell it. And then guess what? They need to pay the DSCR lender, they need to pay the seller, and the property doesn't appraise for 500,000 anymore. So that's.
So
Mhm.
again, just to make sure we're clear on that, to start with, the property was worth 500,000. The DSCR lender was lending 80%, and we would not want to see a property that's leveraged, 100%. But if somebody went and leveraged it to 130, that gets it to $650,000 that they're taking out.
Yep.
And am I correct in telling the people the fraud happens when the DSCR lender is in first position, lending, thinking they're safe by lending 80% on a $500,000 property, and meanwhile, for whatever reason, it's being leveraged at 650. That's not,
Yeah.
it's not, it's,
Yeah.
it's not unethical. It's just fraud, because there's no way the house is worth 650,000.
Right.
So then, as Rad says, let's say a few months down the road, 7, 8 months down the road, the new buyer decides, oh, heck, this isn't working. I'm going to have to sell. But meanwhile, the house has dropped from 500,000 to 450. So now it's not just 130% over, it's considerably more. And here's where it really, I think, gets to bring out the unsavory individuals. If a person is doing this on purpose to be able to walk away with money in their pockets, which they would have if they did that, they would have walked away with, from 650 to the, what is it, 80%. So almost 200 plus
Yeah.
$1,000.
250 if we just ballpark it.
Exactly. $250,000. They walk away with it, and they know that this is going to go down.
Yeah.
So they don't even make any payments. And now there aren't any payments being made for 8 months. Meanwhile, the house is dropping in price.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's a bad situation
gets,
for everybody involved, right? Because the
oh,
buyer, if the buyer can't make the payments, then they would get foreclosed on. But also the seller is risking having the equity. Their
completely, because the DSCR lender's in first position.
Yep.
Seller carryback happens on second position.
Mm-hmm.
So they owned a $500,000 property outright. They thought they were helping someone, and that they knew in their minds that they couldn't get 500,000, or they were wanting it fast, or for whatever reason. They said, okay, we're doing a seller carryback. And, down the road a little bit, they've lost all their equity. There are no more payments coming back. They got bamboozled.
Right. At the same time, I want to add that while you said that the seller would be helping the buyer, I think it's a mutually beneficial agreement when it's structured correctly. And we have seen multiple of those that have been structured correctly. We've talked to several buyers who buy and have been able to grow their portfolio considerably using these methods correctly. I think there is a time and place for, having maybe not over leveraging, but having
Definitely not over leveraging. He didn't mean to say, he meant no freaking way over leverage.
yeah. There are times when the buyers would need additional funding, right? If they would need to, set up an Airbnb, for example, right? And if there is enough room, and if they have underwritten it correctly, then I think that makes sense, right?
Yes.
But having outrageous over leveraging is not something that we are funding. Let's just leave it at that.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's interesting that this vehicle, which really can be a really good vehicle for getting a deal done quickly, or a deal done for a price that is reasonable but not over leveraged, can work. It can be very good. But the other side of that line where the problems begin is when it is over leveraged, and the house property is continuing to decline, and there's no skin in the game for unscrupulous people that just turn around and walk away. So what does that mean if you're in this business? It means you need to be super careful, I think, because you might say, well, hey, who cares? Our money's only in there for just a few minutes, or a day or 2 or 3. We're out. Not if you're going to get sued, because if you looked at it and you said, dang, that house doesn't look like a $650,000 house, and you did your own comps, it didn't take a brain to realize, like, that is way over leverage. You're in it. You're in it. So that is very interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found interesting, Raz,
Mhm.
and we've spoken to a fair number, and we still want to talk to a whole lot more. How many actual transactional funders have we come across? Because we talked to a lot of people. Have we come across a lot of transactional funders?
Well, I think there is that. I think what you're alluding to is the distinction between people who are actually funding these deals themselves versus folks who are finding deals and then maybe using someone else's money to get these across the finish line. And if you're talking about the former, I think it's just a handful, right, of people that we've met who are doing this. There are a lot of people, especially in the communities that we're part of, that use other people's money to do that, and there's of course nothing wrong with that. It's just a distinction. What we do in Sunrise Capital Partners, we of course have capital partners as well, because at some level we need to do that, so we prepared for it. But what we are doing is we are funding with our own funds as well. So we like to be part of the deal with Effie and I. And yeah, I think that's one of the things that we do differently. But did you want to say anything more about the transactional funders that we talked to?
It is a distinction that I wish in some ways was articulated better, because we decided early on, as Raz said a moment ago, that we want to put at least some of our own money in each deal. Why? Because we want to look at the deal. And if it is not a good deal, we won't do it. But if it's a good deal, well, we'll put a little bit of our own money in too, because that's where the partners comes in. Sunrise Capital Partners. We're in it with you. And of course, we do have people that bring capital to us too. Yes, everybody's going to run out of money.
Yeah.
But if you don't have any funds, and there is a way for you to still participate in this, and that is to bird dog, to go find the wholesaler or go find the investor and bring them to the transactional funder. And there are a lot. And I just wish that in some way it could be a better distinction, because I think that if you want to be a bird dog, you should be a proud bird dog. You should say, I go looking to help these people, and these are the people that I'm working with, or these are the 4 sets of people I'm working with, or companies I'm working with, and be open about it so that the individual who's coming to you understands that what your role really is. So
Yeah.
I encourage bird dogs to be really great bird dogs, and to show pride in your work by articulating that and not hiding behind the word a funder if you're not really doing the funding, or you do the funding once in every 20 deals. So I found that was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And now, will we ever have bird dogs? We haven't got there yet. But I would say, we haven't discussed this, so I'm on a limb a little bit. But I would say, of course, we're going to offer referral fees if people are bringing
Yeah.
business to us. We want to say thank you. We want to say thank you to the person who is doing that. And we want to help the people that they might not be in a position to help. But to actually set it up as part of our structure, to say that's how we're going to scale.
I mean, I think what you're talking about is that yes, we would welcome it, but we don't want to make that our main mode of operation. Just like how we are building this company and this business, we want to base it on relationships. So if you are willing to send us leads and deals, we would welcome that. We would like to get to know you and to share some of what our lending box is, right? Just like we said that we wouldn't fund over leveraged deals for seller carrybacks. We would like to, for you to understand that, and for you to be able to look for types of deals that are, that have good structures, that where the incentives are correct. And those are the types of partnerships we would like to form. And if you are one of those folks, definitely reach out and talk to us. We would love to meet you and to see how we can build a mutually beneficial relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And scaling for us is not quite, it isn't about numbers of people per se, because if you find one wholesaler that does a lot of double closes, I don't know. I suppose maybe down the road we'd be so big that our company would be like humongous, and we could always be looking for more. But at least at this point of getting going, we're really looking for the depth of relationship,
Yeah.
so that we know the kind of business that they're doing. And we have yet to do our first deal. This is another thing that caught me a little bit by surprise. It seemed like it's a blue ocean. It's a blue ocean. Go, go, go. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. Yeah, if you want to just take anything. But if we're using the philosophy that we're using of building long-term relationships, putting our own money in it, trying to make sure that it's a positive deal, it's taking time. And I'm glad that we can do that. I'm
Yeah.
glad that we have that.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
actually one of the things that we discussed in one of the conversations that we had with one transactional funder, where they said that they're structuring specifically seller carrybacks in a certain way. We don't have to go into the details of how exactly they structure it, but in a way that doesn't put them at an advantage, let's say, in the deal. Not that the deal went south or anything, but not optimal, not how we would do it. And we asked the question, hey, why are you doing it this way? And the answer was, well, I'm in a place and in a position where I need to take all the deals that come my way. I'm kind of forced to do that. And we are not in that position, fortunately.
we're fortunate that we don't have to worry about that, right? I'd like to talk a little bit about how I realized that we have to send flowers and chocolate on every major transaction we do.
That's new. Tell me more.
Well, we learned, we've been learning a lot. And we learned about one particular transaction that everything was as straight as an arrow could be. And the transactional funder came to learn that there was major fraud, that there was no office at the address that they felt was the lawyer's office. So the lawyer was a lawyer, but for whatever reason had crossed over to the dark side. And it was about $500,000 that they basically lost. And the transactional funder, being who he is, such a warrior, went and did what he had to do. Well, he didn't do anything illegal, to get his money back. And I remember at that time thinking, wait, this could have actually been checked out. And I had said to Raz that when we transact, we have to have boots on the ground that will go to the building and take a picture showing that their name is on the directory, and going into the office and taking a selfie. Well, since I said that to you, I started to think, what might be a better way of doing it than just to, like, hey, buddy, we're going to prove you're here. And I just thought of flowers and chocolates. Flowers for the front desk receptionist, the person who we'd be talking to, and chocolates for the title uh, person or the lawyer. And of course, a selfie with the chocolates, a selfie with the flowers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, great idea.
say a little thank you to every single person who is good and company that's good, while at the same time putting that piece of fear to rest.
Yeah. Great point.
Because, the transactional funder had actually looked up the building, like he saw the building. He said, okay, but he didn't have anybody go there and go inside. And that's human. But send flowers and chocolates to all of your title companies, and be self-assured. Send it with an Uber driver. Just tell them, here, and I need you to send me proof. Don't leave it at the door. I need proof that you delivered these flowers.
Yeah.
I need proof that you delivered these chocolates. I was going to say wine too, but you know what? Maybe not a good idea. Just chocolate. So that was one thing that I learned. What other things have you thought of that, you learned?
One thing that stood out to me, especially in the first weeks when we launched, was people came to us with very large transactions, $5 million, $17 million, even, and we talked about them. And usually, the higher the transaction, the higher the dollar amount, the higher the risk, right? And not to mention that it might take longer to put the money together, depending on the amount. Now, we discussed how we want to approach that, and we agree that in the beginning, at least, and we actually know quite a few folks who are very established who do not cross certain thresholds, right? So we talked about how we are going to keep it under 1 million, potentially consider over 1 million up to 2 million, but we will be more cautious about the deal and about how we underwrite it from our perspective. But for the time being, we want to stick to 1 million or less for double closes and seller carrybacks until we get everything rolling correctly. It was just surprising that there were a lot of people coming out of the woodwork saying that they have a double close for $17 million and things like that. You know, it may be true, it may happen from our conversations with other folks who have done multiple deals. Those deals don't tend to close as often, which is also something that deterred us. But then again, there's also the risk, right? Higher risk of fraud from the title company, higher risk of scams, and all those things led to our decision. I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that.
No, I think that that's a good point. And it also brings to mind that one of the other things that surprised me is that when we opened the website, one of the very first inquiries we got was for from someone who wanted to invest, wanted to bring their funds. And
Very flattering, right?
yes, extremely flattering. I'd like to think it's someone who has watched every single one of my videos. I don't know. But what was interesting was that I didn't know them. And did you know them?
No, no, I didn't.
Yeah. So it was interesting. We decided, I reached back out. That was interesting to me. That money, we're set and we have capital partners, but there are many people who are willing to bring amounts. If we know you and we know you well, we trust you, we will work with you and put your money to good work. But it's that responsibility is huge. It's huge to take someone's money. And even though these are very safe because they don't leave title, they're quick. Even then, I'm not sure I want to take money from people that I do not know because it's even a bigger, like what? So that surprised me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
surprised me. But I think that's really about it for now.
I think so. Yeah. I'm sure we'll have more to share. Maybe we'll make this a recurring video,
Yeah,
like a recurring report. Maybe once a month we share what we've learned. And yeah.
absolutely. We are 2 months in, almost to the day, and we will let you know how long will it take us? What will that first deal be like?
Yeah. And if you would
Yeah,
like to surprise us and make it go faster, we'll have you featured on the podcast.
that's a deal. That's a deal. All right. Thank you, Raz.
All right.
And
Thank you,
you
Effie.
take care. We shall see you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.